Welcome back. I am really bushy. So, we have a heavy hitter of shit coming this coming Friday. So, I know there's the Beyonce album, but unironically, my main event is Machine Gun Kelly and Trippie Redd with an album title, Genre Sad Boy. And if you've looked at the album cover too, I am terrified of what I'm about to experience. So, what I decided to do is compile two of the most recent albums from MGK and Trippie Redd. I'm going to start with MGK first. I will fully admit I totally despise MGK. It's a total scumbag. So, this Mainstream Cell is the most recent album. And this was the second kind of attempt and kind of push into the mainstream pop punk revivalism that we are seeing over the past couple of years. I am fully for the revivalism of pop punk, especially the pop punk of the early 2000s. I love stuff like Sum 41. I love stuff like Billy Talent. I love stuff like Yellowcard. There's some really good pop punk, and while there is a lot of terrible pop punk mixed in there, I believe pop punk is necessary because it does provide a place for emotion and it provides a voice for some people, especially in this upcoming generation that maybe feels a little closeted with their emotions, maybe are dealing with a lot of mental health issues. I find that pop punk is a really good avenue to explore these more serious topics into a more kind of lighter context, if you understand what I mean. So I completely understand the merit and why it is coming back in such the way it is. The big problem with this is, however, is that a lot of people are getting introduced to pop punk through MGK. And I believe that there's so many different pop punk artists that are doing this sound so much better coming into this decade. I can think of Neck Deep, for an example, that is very much kind of the cloth of older artists. And you can even see Bring Me the Horizon is kind of bringing back that Linkin Park new metal-esque sound. And a lot of people are gravitating towards MGK, which I understand because it is very easy and very accessible pop punk. Not to say that for other artists it's a bad thing, but I think for MGK, especially with Mainstream Sellout, he fully plays into the fact that he has fully gone pop punk, and it plays right into the cliches of the emo girl. I believe there's a line about slitting wrists. It's totally playing into the aesthetic of being emo, being a sad boy, and kind of playing into the cliches of pop punk. And you can like it as much as you want, but for my personal opinion, and especially with this album, it is just way too generic. It is way too just trying to be controversial, to be out there without any kind of bite to it that a lot of pop punk from back then used to have. But Tickets to My Downfall was honestly not a bad start. It did have the Travis Barker drums, and I believe it was also executive produced by Travis Barker. Both of these albums were. But I believe Tickets to My Downfall was more of a genuine attempt to kind of recapture that sound. Is there some songs that are good on Tickets to My Downfall? I think there is. I think the title track is pretty decent. And I believe, honestly, the track with Black Bear, I completely forget the name of it. But honestly, it's not that bad. And this moment in time, it felt like a genuine attempt of recapturing the sound. But when you get to Mainstream Sellout, it's almost like you played it safe, and then not to mention too, it's just like you're at this point where you can do anything and your fans will be absolutely just eating it up because they're not maybe really familiar with pop punk. I'm not trying to be a gatekeeper or anything like that. I'm just saying that the pop punk that MGK is bringing is just not that interesting. So that's MGK's side of this Genre Sad Boy album. But now we get into Trippie Redd, who has a very interesting career when you look at the general scope of his career. Started off with Life's a Trip, and the two albums were Life's a Trip and I Love Letter to You 3. I love those two albums. Life's a Trip has some of my favorite songs of last decade, and A Love Letter to You 3 is a pretty good album. I think it's very good, honestly. But the past few years of Trippie Redd's career have been so volatile and so just rushed that I feel like the vision, I feel like the drive to make music either is being pushed to the side to push out content and to push out music for fans, or it is being completely neglected altogether. So, A Love Letter to You 5 is the most recent album. I'm not counting St. Michael. No, I'm not. A Love Letter to You 5, honestly, I enjoyed. I didn't think it was the best album of all time, per se, or even the best mixtape or album of that year, but it was a nice kind of tone down of the music that was coming up beforehand. This A Love Letter to You, the fifth one of the Love Letter to You series, was definitely its most stripped back, its most quietest, and honestly, it played to its strength. There was a lot of great songs on here. I'm trying to think of some songs that were on here that I really liked. It's been a while since I listened to this thing, but overall, I enjoyed A Love Letter to You 5. But before that, there was Mansion Music. So Mansion Music was executive produced, I believe, by Chief Keef. So you're expecting some bangers, and you do get them, especially towards the first portion of the album. But once you get into the middle to the latter portion of this album, it just completely falls apart. And that's the big problem that Trippie Redd has been having, is to make an album that is consistently good the whole way through, where it doesn't see a noticeable dip, especially towards the latter end. I feel like Trippie focuses more on the front end of the album than the latter and the back end, because a lot of the times the album starts out really good and then just falls off a cliff once you get to, like, track 15 or 16, and you still have like 4 or 5 tracks to go after that. But I also threw Neon Shark on here. And the reason why I threw Neon Shark on here is that I actually liked the attempt that Trippie did also going into this pop punk direction. There's the track Swimming, there's the track of Geronimo with Chino Moreno of Deftones. There was Leaders. There was actually a lot of good songs on this little departure from the really bloated and just really underwhelming Pegasus. So you have one artist that plays it safe, and an artist that really just plays to the lowest common denominator and also plays into controversy to a fault, to a tremendous fault. And then you have Trippie Redd, who has been artistically lost for feels like years. So putting these two together, I feel like is going to create either some of the most boring music of their careers, or it is going to generate one of the worst albums of this year. And I'm kind of leaning towards the latter. I don't know how these two can inspire each other to make good music, especially collaboratively, because you have one artist that I don't think is going to push you creatively to Trippie, and Trippie is probably just going to play to MGK, so that way either you get a good radio hit or you kind of just generate numbers where you haven't seen them in a little while. So I think both of these artists are in a really negative place. Do I wish for the album to be good? I mean, I would hope I wish out every album to at least surprise me a little bit, but this is one of the few times where I'm just expecting it to be outright bad. I'm just going to be brutally honest. I expect this to be terrible. I expect this to be in my top 5 worst albums of the year. And we shall see this coming Friday of how that turns out. So, I'm scared. I don't know if you are, but thank you for watching anyways.